Good evening. Uh, Meeting you all after a long time. I took some rest for 1.5 week. Actually, I was busy with some of my works which I had to do, and it were very important. Those works were very important, so uh, I had to postpone my class for some time. I'm back, and as I have noticed already in my Facebook page, and uh, as well as I've told you in my last class, that I will be doing today, it is in this class, two poems of Neruda. One is The Way Spain Was, and another is Discoverers of Chile. So we have 6 poems. We have done one, that is Tonight I Can Write the Saddest Lines. Today we will do 2 poems, and there will be Ode to Tomatoes and Ars Poetic and Poetry most probably, and we will do that after finishing Neruda's poems. If you want, then we can plan to start with another essay of Amit Chaudhary that is there in your syllabus. So come to Neruda here. Now, before starting the poem The Way Spain Was, I would like to point out a very important and significant thing about the colony that the Spanish colonies in South America, and most probably in Latin America and other South American countries. They were quite different from the colonies that we see in Africa and South Asian countries, because in the South Asian colonies, the European colonies of South Asia, that we have seen that the colonizers came only to squeeze out the resources from them, and they only came as traders or who wanted to rule the to pers- uh, to continue their exploitations, and as well as to continue their supremacy, and there was no intention of getting mixed up or intermingling of the colonizers with the colonized people. But in South America, we have seen that the colonizers actually had a sort of settlement in the ultimately settled in the colonies. And what happened, what we have seen in India also, that there came a sort of an upcoming of new civilization and a new history, which actually brought a new sort of wave that is in the colonies, and at the same time they made a sort of disruption in the historical continuity as well as the cultural continuity that existed in the colonies before their invasion. Now the same thing happened in Spain also, not in Spain, I'm sorry, it happened in Latin America also. But here what happened, that the colonizers said, which we don't find the English people, the British ruled India for 200 years, but they always had the intention of going back to their country. They took it only as a colony, as a terrain which is to be conquered, ruled, exploited, as well as appropriated, nothing else. They took it as a hinterland. But what happened in Chile, colonizers here settled, and as they settled, what happened, the erstwhile cultural traditions, the civilizations, that got mixed up with the culture and tradition and the civilization of the colonies. But what happened, because the colonizers were politically more powerful, their cultural traits actually that over the erstwhile that is the native culture and their civilization and tradition. So all these things will come into discussion in both the poems of Neruda, both in The Way Spain Was as well as in Chile. And here we will find that as the nature of colonization was quite different in Latin America, especially in Chile, and from that of other South Asian or African colonies, we will see that Neruda has got a different sort of attitude towards the colonizers and the land that is Spain. So he actually has a deep respect and emotion for his own country, that which actually in turn makes him emotional and sentimental about the country which colonized Chile, and he is even ready to call the colonizing country the motherland. So Spain becomes the mother of Chile. So this is how there is an attitudinal difference in the relationship between the colonizers and the colonized, which we find in Neruda. Other traits of the of retaliation and reactions to the colonial rule you will find, but there is a basic attitudinal difference in the poems, in the post-colonial poems. If you take Neruda as a post-colonial poet, and some post-colonial traits if you are able to find in the works of Neruda, then you will see that there is a sort of attitudinal difference in the works of Neruda, which he wrote in the context of his attitude, of his emotion, of his relationship with the mother country, Spain. Now, actually, what happened in 1492, Columbus came and discovered America, Latin America, and he thought that actually this was India, but that was a mistake on Columbus's part. So that becomes a new Indies to know, because through the Eurocentric view of history, we came to know of the Americans as the American Indian. So, am I loud? Am I okay now? Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay. Please tell me if I'm audible or not. Now, what happened then after Columbus conquered? First, he conquered, that is Peru, and from Peru, then they conquered the various parts of South America and and in Central and South America, and then afterwards the Spanish invasion, and Spain made South America the colony, the Spanish colony, and there was and the more Spanish colonizers came and they colonized various parts of South America and Central America, which were later known as Latin America, and Spain came up as a colonial power with its big empire before the rise of the British Empire as the most powerful, politically powerful country, as an empire. But later, what happened however, by 1714, we see that the European territories, what happened, the Spanish Empire started breaking up, and there was a rise of the nationalist movement by 1826, and what happened, Spain started losing its colonies in America, and there was a political unrest, and which continued to disrupt and destroy the Spanish Empire, and Spain actually was defeated in the Spanish-American War in 1898. And what happened, Cuba, Puerto Rico and Philippines, they were taken up by United States. Now at that time, General Prima de Rivera, so the name is Prima de Rivera, General Prima de Rivera seized the power in 1921, and who was succeeded by Alfonso III, who forced him to quit in 1930. So in 1921, Rivera became the ruler of Spain, and he was succeeded by Alfonso, who actually banished Rivera. And in 1931, Alfonso himself was made to abdicate after the Republicans won the elections in a landslide victory. So what happened, there was a rule of the dictators. First we find the rule of Rivera, then that is Alfonso, and after, what happened in 1931, the Republicans were they came into power in a landslide victory. And what happened in 1936 again, so there was a rule of the Republicans in Spain from 1931 to 1936, and in 1936 what happened, the Republicans were re-elected when the fears of a socialist revolution led of a military uprising and the Spanish Civil War ensued. And what happened, there was the rise of the Phalangists, who were actually the anti-republicans, and they were actually trying to gather power to fight against, to attack the Republican rule in France. And what happened war in France, and when Neruda was actually writing, he saw the effects of civil war in sorry, not in France, or in Spain. And what happened, we have seen that two of Neruda's best friends, that is, one is a famous playwright, that is Gabriel Garcia Lorca, murdered by the phalangists, and Neruda became very much clear of the effects of this civil war, and he openly entered into the very political field that was related to the Spanish Civil War, and he became very much against the Civil War. He started openly against the Spanish Civil War, because that this civil war is only leading towards destruction. Now, what happened? The civil war happened from 1936 to 1939, and it was what happened. It was led by General Francisco Franco, the civil war, and after that, Franco started the fascist regime, and supported by the fascist rulers of Germany and Italy. As you all know, Hitler supported him and Mussolini also supported him, and Franco was made head of the state for life in 1947. So this was the political history that we see in the case of Spain, and what were the backgrounds of the Spanish Civil War, and how actually though being a man, of a poet, of a colony of Spain, how Neruda actually wanted to sympathize as well as empathize with the situations of France or situations of Spain, and how he directly entered into the very political situation, and how he started reacting to the reasons and the political responses of the Spanish Civil War after the death, especially after the death of his two of his friends, that is Hernandez and Lorca. Now, when he was writing, the way Spain was actually, Neruda was a communist poet, and he was a very active member of the Communist Party in Chile, and he later he became a very important member, as well as a member of the diplomatic service of Chile, and he was sent to various other countries. So what happened, Neruda was being a communist, and as he comes from a communist background, Neruda was always very anxious to speak of the common issue, the social issues of in general, or specifically Chile or Spain in particular. But though he always had a sort of ideology behind his creative writings, or he had a purpose, his poems were never a propagandist writing, but he always wanted to communicate with his readers, or he always wanted to tell his readers about the common cause, about the social cause. And here we will see that Neruda is crossing the colonial boundaries, and he starts taking up the colony of Chile, that is Spain, as the motherland of Chile, and he tries to open up the situation, the social situation of Spain, that what actually a country is not made up of the political parties, the ruling parties, the intelligentsia, the academic, the aristocratic class. Actually, they do not make up the country. A country, the heartthrob of the country, according to Neruda, lies with the common people, whom he calls the proletariat. Being a communist poet, he takes up and he uses the proletariat issue in his poetry to cause of the common people and the social issues. Now, first of all, I will read the poem first. Then I will go into the discussion. I think everybody is okay with my voice. I'm audible. Okay. So this poem is from the Third Residence, and it was published in 1947. The way Spain was. how was Spain and what it is now. So the title of the poem itself takes you to a very comparative study of what it was in the past and what it is now. So how the poem starts: taut and dry Spain was, a day's drum of dull sound, a plain, an eagle's eyrie, a silence below the lashing weather. How unto crying out unto the very soul, I love your barren soil and your rough bed, your stricken people. How in the depths of me grows the lost flower of your villages, timeless, impossible to budge. Your tracts of minerals, bulging like old stars under the moon, devoured by an imbecile god. All your extensions, your bestial solitude, join with your sovereign intelligence, haunted by the obstructed stones of silence, your harsh wine and your sweet wine, your violent and delicate vineyards. Stone of the sun, peer among territories, Spain veined with bloods and metals, blue and victorious, proletariat of petals and bullets, alone, alive, somnolent, resounding. So this is how the poem goes, and here we see that how he is describing the Spain and how it was and how it is now and what has happened after this political disturbances and after this civil war. Now what it is now. Now he starts with taut and dry Spain was. It was taut and dry. So here the word taut actually gives an idea of the taut means tight. It was very tight. Tight means when something is tight means it lacks a sort of fecundity. It is dry, tight and severe. So when I'm talking of Spain as a country, as taut and dry Spain was. So Spain was dry and taut means it's dry. It lacks fecundity. Fecundity means there is softness. So Spain is very tough. Tough mean what? It is very much the military power, which is tough, which actually apparently lacks any kind of emotional softness. So the military gives more importance on duty, but it lacks those emotional touches, apparently. There may be other discourses and other narratives also from the point of view, from the perspective of the military forces, but I'm not taking it into consideration here. So here he says that Spain is taut and dry, tight and very arid. Arid means it is very dry. Why? It is in terms of duty. So it is very dutiful. It is very taut. It is very tight, dry, severe. Taut and dry Spain was. And then with an alliteration, he says that this life, because of this military power, so the military power is actually controlling the land of Spain, the geographical terrain of Spain, the territory of Spain, the geographical piece of land, as well as the psychological land that resides, that is there in the mind of all the Spanish people. So all have become dry, lifeless, because of the controllings of the military power. That's why it is taut and dry Spain was. And then with an alliteration he says, a day's drum of dull sound. So he gives the dull sound of drums. The sound of drums actually gives you an idea, sense of the impending war. When in olden days, when the war used to start, there were drum beats, as you've seen in various mythical serials and stories that you see in television, that the drum beats actually marks the beginning of a war. Okay, a day's drum of dull sound. He says that it is a very monotonous drum beatings. So the poem starts with a description of a country as taut, dry, dry. In terms of duty, it is very dutiful, it is very rigorous, it lacks any kind of emotional touches, and it is marked with the monotonous drum beatings that gives us an idea of an impending war. A dull sound, a plain, an eagle's eyrie. Now, what happens? Eagle's eyrie means the nest of an eagle, or some such birds which make their that build their nests high up at the top of the hills, on the plain tableland at the high hilltops. So the eagles build their nest there. It is called the eyrie. So a silence below the lashing weather. And what happens when you see the eagle's eyrie? What happens? The nest of an eagle. So what happens? They are they face the tumultuous weather because it is high up. The more the nest is high up in the air, the more it is high, it faces the attacks of the tumultuous air. So he says that the eagles, it is very much like the nest of an eagle which faces the lashing weather, the tumultuous weather. Now what happens? This is the very first stanza, gives you the how Nerida wants to see Spain under the military rule, or when there is a war going on, how the effects of the military power controlling the geographical as well as the psychological terrain or the psychological territory of Spain. Now, with the repeated, actually, he very passionately he records the sufferings that Spain is facing, and in the second stanza we will see that how Neruda wants to react to the sufferings of Spain, that he wants to show that he has also considerations and he is also empathetic towards the condition of Spain. Spain means the common people of Spain. How unto crying out unto the very soul, I love your barren soil. Your soil is barren. That means your soil is very hard. It is very stony. That is not very fertile. Okay. So I still love your barren soul and your rough bread. Rough breads means hard breads which are unleavened. So unleavened means when you are using yeast in cake or bread or anything, so that becomes soft because the fermentation happens. So if you don't mix yeast, if you don't mix up yeast in your bread dough, what happens? The bread becomes very hard. So all the images that he is using to describe the conditions of Spain, the condition of Spain, and the thing with the images that he are using to describe Spain are all arid, all dry, tight, hard, which lacks fecundity. Okay, I love your barren soil and your rough bread, your stricken people. So barren soil means the soil which is not fertile, bread, hard bread means which is unleavened, and stricken people, the people who are stricken by war, who are stricken in their daily lives, the common people who are maximum affected by any kind of disturbances that happen in the country, the common people, the poor people. So the three things that he describes, that his soul is crying to see what? His soul is crying to see the barren land, the rough bread, and the stricken people. So when I'm crying, it does not show sort of disgust to those things which are actually not favorable to see up. They are not very favorable things to see or to experience. A barren land, it has something very negative in it. It lacks fertility. Rough bread, it is not very tasty, not palatable. And stricken people, they are not happy people. So all these are unhappy things. But his soul, it is not disgusted to see that, but his soul is crying. His soul is trying to empathize with the unfavorable, unhappy things that he sees in France, in Spain. And for this, what happens? He shows his sympathy towards the country mainly comprising the common mass, the poor people, the proletariat, whom he describes as proletariat at the end of the poem. Your stricken people, how in the depths of me grows the lost flower of your villages. So the villages that are the flowers that are lost in your villages. So when we think of village, when we think of a country life, we are used to describe, we are used to see the country life as very much close to nature, where you will find flowers, flora and fauna. But here he says the villages, they lack the flowers are lost. But from the depth of his heart, he feels for those villages which have lost their flowers, their beauty, their softness, the beautiful touches of nature. Grows the lost flower of your villages, timeless, impossible to budge. He says that actually, physically, the villages may lose their flower, lose their touch of nature, but actually it is impossible to displace them. So actually a village, when we think of village, when we think of a place which is very close to nature, the images of trees, flora, fauna, green, positive power, all this comes to our mind. So physically they are not there. The villages actually lack the flower, the touch of nature, but they are there in the very soul of the villages. And he says this because he is very much optimistic that one day these villages will be able to regain these touches of nature. Timeless, impossible to budge, your tracts of minerals bulging. Now he's describing actually he's trying to give a full picture of Spain, that Spain was so beautiful physically, naturally so beautiful, with rich resources, sources of minerals. So but your tracts of minerals bulging like oysters under the moon. So when we talk of minerals means you have to dig them up. So minerals are there, it is formed under the deep layers of earth for many years. They are very old, of antique period, and then somebody discovers. You will also see that how Neruda is bringing in the imageries of mines and minerals in his poem Discoveries of Chile also, because Chile is rich in mineral resources. So your tracts of minerals bulging like oysters, they are very old oysters under the moon, devoured by an God. So all these things, an imbecile God, an idiot God. So he is describing he is trying to describe the rulers as gods, which actually he does because he's a communist poet and he don't believes in God, in the existence of God. And the communists believe that actually religion is a sort of opium, which actually somnolent. He will use the word somnolent. It actually does what? It is a sort of a sedative that leads you to sleep without being awakened, without being aware of the things happening. So religion is something like that. And Marxism was actually the philosophical movement that wanted to fight against these sedative powers, these sedative ideologies that resist man from realizing the situation, that resist man from questioning, from trying to question, from trying to analyze the thing. So all these things you will find that Neruda is trying to describe the rulers of France who were actually dictators, rulers of Spain who were actually the dictators, as gods, and he describes them as imbecile, stupid, idiot God. Idiot means one who is what? Is insensitive. One who is not only dull but insensitive. One who fails to understand the real pulse is an imbecile idiot. And he says that both this natural resources of Spain and the mineral and the minerals of Spain, the rich mines that Spain has. Spain is so much opulent in all respect. All these are getting devoured by a ruler who is imbecile, whom he describes as God. All your extensions, your bestial solitude, joined with your sovereign intelligence, hunted by the abstracted stones of silence. So he says that the common mass, the common part, the maximum part of Spain, and Spain in particular, and any country in general, the common people, they are silenced. They cannot voice out against the dictatorial pressure and domination that is happening over them. Your harsh wine and your sweet wine. So Spain was actually, like other Mediterranean countries, were famous for the grape wines from which good quality of wine were actually made. So he says that your harsh wine, the wines were harsh, and your sweet wine. So actually he says, he describes the with the wine imagery, that wine which actually makes you intoxicated, but they're very sweet to eat, but it has a harsh effect. Your violent and delicate vineyards. So he says that these people, the common people, they are asleep. They are not aware of the things, the oppression they are facing. But one day, Neruda is sure that they will be awakened, they will rise up, and they will voice against this dictatorial power. Stone of the sun. So he says that stone of the sun, the stone which is getting tempered in the sun for many years, that is a permanent thing, a stone which becomes very tempered, tough, and which can actually accept and admit many things. The common mind, the common psyche is very much like the stone of the sun, which is tempered, which is which can admit as well as which can endure many things. Peer among territories. Spain, vein with bloods, and so he says, he describes Spain as a bleeding Spain, as a country which is bleeding. And metals means, it describes of the metallic weapons. It actually gives an idea of war, that Spain is bleeding because of war. It is blue, is bruised at victorious. Proletariat of petals and bullets. So the proletariats have this oppositional qualities in them. They have the petals, which gives an idea of the flowers, the softness, as well as the bullets, which kills, which has a destructive power. Proletariat of petals and bullets. All the things that describe Spain, that describe the positive sides of Spain. Spain has lost all those things because of this rule of this imbecile god. But he says that the alive power, it is very much like the seed, which actually seems something dead, but it has the power to germinate and bloom into a very big tree. A seed can give birth to a big tree. So apparently it looks dead, but actually it is potentially powerful to give birth to a life. So he says it is the proletariats who are alone alive. They are somnolent, they are sleepy. Maybe presently they are sleepy like the seed, but resounding. They have the reverberation of heartbeats in them. That Neruda is very much sure that one day they will arise and awake. They will be aware of the things happening around them, and they will become aware of the things, and they will voice out against the dominations and oppressions done by the imbecile god. So Neruda reacted against the civil war of Spain after the death of his friend Lorca and Hernandez. So this is what actually we see in the poem, the way Spain was. And now we will come to the next point, that is the discoverers of Chile. So I'll take a short break and we'll come back.